Do you suffer from painful, heavy periods, PMS, mood swings, or migraines? Are you tired of being told they are just normal parts of life? Or are you afraid your child's going to suffer these symptoms too? At Vividus, the full of life company, we take the pain, misery, and confusion out of those menstrual cycles and replace them with tools of empowerment and time management so you can be Vividus. Visit embracingflowpodcast.com for more information on transforming your cycles from ow to wow.
Ever felt frustrated being told PMS, heavy bleeding, and cramping are just normal parts of life? You're not alone. I loathed my monthly cycle for decades. That all changed when I earned 3 health coaching certifications discovering something incredible. Your period is vital. It is an outward sign of your inner health, and it holds the key to unlocking your full potential. I've been there battling heavy, painful periods, and I turn them into cycles with minimal PMS and cramping. Today, I'm on a mission to share that information with you. Pour a cup of your favorite drink, get comfy, and grab your headphones as we embark on a candid and empowering journey of self-discovery. Together, we'll demystify menstrual cycles, explore cyclical living, delve into natural birth control, and guide parents through those crucial period talks with tweens and teens. It's time to break the taboo around menstruation and embrace the wisdom it holds. I'm your host, Heather Allmendinger, and this is the Embracing Flow podcast.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Embracing Flow. I'd like to introduce our guest today, an expert at Embracing Flow, Mr. Kevin O'Connor. Hello, Kevin. How are you today?
Hey, thank you for having me here today. It's been a pleasure to set this up with you and have our previous exchanges on other venues that we've been having. So I'm looking forward to our time together today.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a little while, Kevin. And listeners, you'll find out why here in just a few minutes. Before we dive into that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on Kevin. Kevin O'Connor is the author of Two Floors Above Grief, a memoir of two families in the unique place we called home. His prior writing includes a dissertation, personal letters, articles in professional publications, anthologies, and presentations delivered at conferences, seminars, and webinars. He raised as the son of a Chicago suburban undertaker. O'Connor built a 50-year career as an elementary teacher, principal, and graduate instructor in California, Illinois, and Florida. He enjoys chronicling the stories of families and friends through genealogical histories. He sings, performs in theaters, and resides in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, with his husband, Leon. Their family includes 5 sons and 7 granddaughters. He references further connections in his writings, continues his stories, and highlights his perspectives at KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com. Again, I am so happy to have you, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here. Your book has a very special story in it that others of my listeners can really kind of understand. Would you share that story of that conversation that you had with your father? What age were you? Kind of give us that picture so we can go back and be with you as you had this conversation with your father.
Well, thanks for that welcome. Thanks for that offer to share the story that's put in the book. I thought it was important for the book. As I get into the story, I thought it was important for the book because the book is about family stories. It's aside from the idea that we were living in apartments above a funeral home, the stories are about the families that live there. My dad and mom, and my 2 brothers, and my aunt and uncle, and their 3 daughters. So we all live together in these conjoined apartments. So it's the book is not so much about the people, the clients of the funeral home. It's about how starting in 1930 and up to 1984, how my uncle and my dad owned and operated the funeral home, and the family stories that happened in the apartments above. One of those stories ties in with my dad and me, and I portray in the book as a dialogue. Although I don't have, I didn't have that recorded. I know the incident, I know the feeling, I know the emotions at the time, and I'll just tell you about it and how I thought it was important to put it in the book because there's a 10-year age span between my older brother, who was born in 1940, and me, who was born in 1950. There was an old TV show in the '60s. I was about 10 years old at the time. There was some medical TV shows, that had premiered that year. One was called Doctor Kildare, and the other one was called Ben Casey. They premiered at the same year, different stations, but they were the forerunners and probably the first of the medical TV shows that have evolved into all the ones that have happened since then. And, Doctor Kildare starred Richard Chamberlain, who is still with us and still somewhat active in his acting and has gone on to other, movies and things too. But, I had been watching this show that night on my own. Again, this is 1960, um, and watching it as it ran. It wasn't a rerun or anything. It was, yeah, you had to watch things as they happened in those days. Nothing streaming. We didn't even know that word other than looking at a water stream. But anyway, um, so after the show ended, I came out to my dad, and he was very domestic in his way, and he helped a lot with the house. So he happened to be cleaning the house at 8 o'clock, at 9 o'clock at night, and I said, "Hey, Dad, I have a question for you." "What's up?" And I said, "Hey, I was watching, Doctor Kildare, and they talked about, one of the people in the show was talking about how, uh, she was having trouble having children, and they used the word miscarriage, and I don't know what that means. Well, can you talk to me about it?" So my dad, as I portray in the book, he just, as he was working and occasionally he'd sit down and sit knee to knee with me and tell me, he started to unpack the story about how, when my brother was born in 1940, shortly a year after he and my mom got married, they had my brother, and no incidents, no problems by 1940, end of 1940. They wanted to have a bigger family. But, then they started to try, and he explains in the book about what trying I'd ask as a 10-year-old, "What do you mean you tried?" Well, then he said, "Hey, 10-year-old, have the kids talked to you about any of this stuff before?" "What stuff, Dad?" And I go back and forth, and it was fun making up the dialogue, and how he presented this to a 10-year-old. And anyway, the story evolves that he then began to tell me about how my mom would become pregnant and then, would lose the baby, and that was another part of the, "What do you mean lose the baby?" And so it was just a way to explain to me, and he talked about how this happened repeatedly in those years between, 1941 and 1949. She had 5 miscarriages, and um, and he explains the whole thing, and then how in 1949, after they had done whatever they knew about these situations, and that in the 1940s, they decided to have a surgical procedure. I'm not sure what that was, but whatever the surgical procedure was, it allowed her, or, lack for a better word, allowed her, her body was able to hang on to the pregnancy, which was me. And, and so what I wanted to bring out in the book was not so the story about the miscarriages, and I think what it ended up portraying too was how involved my dad was in this whole thing, and how there's one part that says, "How did you?" I think I asked him, "How did you feel?" And he said, "It really hurt." He said, "It didn't hurt me in the physical sense, and your mother was hurting in the physical sense, but together we were trying to figure out what to do, and I know how much it hurt her." And I was writing, and as the book has been published and I've been talking about it more, thinking about the father's role in this, and how important it is, and me being from a male perspective, I can relate that a little bit more, and it was never, after that discussion with my dad, and I was able to understand why we had this 10-year span, and he talked about how the different members of the family would pitch in, my cousins downstairs who are in their teens, and how they were didn't want my mom to carry the groceries upstairs on the 3rd floor, just different things they were all helping out, and how dad and, she decided to sometimes keep things discreet and not tell people because the idea that they were, mom was feeling that she was failing and wasn't working, and he said he just kept supporting her along the way. And he talked about going to the doctors with her so they would learn together what was going on. So, it gave me a model to follow when I became a father in 1982, the first time, and 84 the second time. My wife at the time and I didn't experience the miscarriage part, but certainly knowing about how my dad and mom operated as parents and as a couple provided a wonderful model for me to learn about what my wife was experiencing in pregnancy and how to go with her to the doctor and be involved. And of course, from 40s to the 80s, things had changed tremendously in what a dad was able to do. So I think in some ways, as I look back, maybe dad was a little bit ahead of his time. I'm not sure if he had to force his way into these doctor's offices or he just insisted on going. But he was very involved with the whole process and the pain, the hurt that it caused, and the joy that resulted. And I close that chapter by saying, having heard that story and experienced the love that I had from both my mom and dad, and then the birth of my brother a year later, um, I've always felt I never had a question in my mind that me or my younger brother wasn't wanted, or some kids will get that perception, I think, in their household. I never had that because I know what they did to try to work through everything to make a birth happen. And, so that's I mean, I tell it in different ways in the book, but that's a little summary just without reading it out loud. That's a summary of what that chapter is about, and a summary of my own experiences as I remember them with my father. My mother rarely talked about it until she was in a hospice in a hospital, and the nurse came in. This is 2010, and he said she was pretty alert, even though she just had a few hours to live. "Miss O'Connor, what's this scar here for? What is this? I haven't seen anything else on your body." And she said, "Well, I don't know." She was 93 at the time. I said, "Mom, I wonder if that's from the surgery that you had in 1949, so you could get pregnant with me and Carrie." She says, "Yeah, you might be right." So, and a few hours later, she was gone. So, but that's a summary of the whole story. And I could go on, but let's keep talking. But that's how. And when I first met you and I first heard your stories and was talking to you in different venues that we've been on, I just kept connecting with this story about my mom and
Yeah,
my dad, importantly, and my dad. It was something they did as a couple.
and that is it's a beautiful story, both with the fact that your dad was so involved in this journey with your mom. It wasn't just your mom. I hear stories from my grandparents, or my grandmother at this point, um, about what she went through with her children. And my grandfather was military, so he wasn't necessarily available.
Mhm, mhm,
And to hear how connected your parents were and how
mm,
they stood by each other and they supported each other
mhm,
is is beautiful in and of itself. And then this story where you asked your dad and you felt comfortable enough to ask your dad, "What is this span?
mm,
Why
mhm,
is there this span?" And
mhm.
him feeling comfortable to sit down and talk to you and explain to you in ways that you understood what was going on in your family during that time. It's just
Yeah,
my heart
yeah,
kind of breaks for your parents with those 5 miscarriages,
yeah.
um, because it's not an easy journey.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Um, Yet you've beautifully portrayed it here, and I'm sure in your book it is also very beautifully portrayed. With that experience, you moved on into did the education part kind of play a role in that conversation with your father? Or was that just something you kind of fell into? Because when we spoke, and even in your bio, your teaching is in a subject that's a little bit outside of social studies, with the sexual health. Did this conversation with your dad have any role in you going in that direction?
Mm, great question. Super question. Um, the Even though my dad and my uncle were funeral directors, and sometimes it happens that a family will take that to another generation. That didn't happen with my siblings or my cousins, and so that's a tribute, I guess. Another way to look at my dad and my uncle, my parents, they never insisted that we follow in their footsteps. Um, so I was always open to finding out what I wanted to do with my life. And just through different classes, I was a political science major, but also did some classes in education. And that's what led me to think, I think I want to be a teacher. Um, and I had a nice career as an elementary teacher, as principal. And it was in 20, so now I did that in 20, got my years 2007, around there, 2010, 11. I ended up working, after I had retired once from being a principal in Illinois, I moved to Fort Lauderdale, another whole story. But I moved to Fort Lauderdale and ended up volunteering and then getting a full-time position in a department in the Broward Public Schools, which is Fort Lauderdale and all the areas around. It's the sixth largest school district in the country. And I worked in a department, it was called Diversity and Inclusion and Equity. But under the umbrella of that department was also not the the people who were engineering and writing the sexual health curriculum for the district and providing the staff development. And so I'd been at the job for a while, and I was doing other things more in line with LGBT organizing and things. But then he came to me and said, "I want you to be part of the sexual health team." And I said, "Oh, what is that?" And I knew the people that worked there, and so around 2012 or so, I launched into that, and uh, 20, maybe even a little later. You get older, you get years mixed up. They all sort of mush together. So somewhere in there, and up through 2020, I was part of a team that put together you could call it family life curriculum or sexual health curriculum, and so here I had been, in my previous part of my career, I had been an elementary principal. And when I retired from that job in 2007, not knowing what was going to happen next, I was still reading books to kindergartners as the principal. Little did I know that 4 or 5 years later, I'd be giving condom demonstrations to high school kids, you know? So I feel blessed that my career has taken on that range. And so being part of the sexual health team was the writing team and the professional development team was a privilege and a learning experience for me too. And fortunately, my colleagues and I just came in with different levels of knowledge and expertise, and it was a joy doing the work. So back to your question, uh, what I've seen as a 10-year-old after talking to my dad, hey, someday I'm going to be a sexual health teacher. Probably not. And being a student in a parochial school, even probably the subject dad was telling me was probably would have been forbidden to even
Mhm.
have in the school I went to. And I was a Catholic school product for, well, up I graduated from a Catholic university. So even the idea looking back that those things even would have brought up in any kind of curriculum that I was having was pretty slim. So I felt really fortunate to be able to help develop the curriculum had already been developed and presented and approved by the school board. The part of the role that was happening as I came on board was how do we teach people to be comfortable and help teachers be comfortable teaching this, and what do we do to tell them it's okay to use the word penis and vagina and other other anatomy parts, and let them know that it's okay and it's really beneficial to kids. So that um, it was a gratifying experience because I got to learn it myself and unpack some of my own stuff that I'd gone through as a student in schools, but also to realize how important it was for kids to know this, and how the earlier we start and how the less we mask it and the more upfront we are about being talking to kids about this, and even as a young age, kindergarten and first grade, to help kids properly identify the parts of the body so that they're not making up words for it. So when they do embark on these, we know kids are going to talk, but when they embark socially to have these conversations, they'll have the correct terminology. And that was part of what we were endeavoring to do. And the other part was just really working hard to have dialogue with teachers to help them, because there was a range from 1 to 10 of comfort levels of how they were going to implement this required curriculum. And so that was, so back to your question, did it have anything to do with my dad? Not at the time, no. But certainly when I got into it, the importance of what we were doing in schools tied into that discussion I had with my dad, and how important it was and how grateful I was to have had a father that captured that moment in time. Thank you, Richard Chamberlain, Dr. Kildare. I mean, who knows if I would have ever brought that up? It was just a lot of variables that came together at that particular moment in 1960, 61, to have me have that discussion with my dad. So yeah, it does connect with dad, but not in a way I would have predicted as an 10 or 11-year-old. So
Yeah, and I see that sometimes there is a direct connection. Other times it's kind of weaved into the rest of our story. Uh, I've had some guests that how they experienced their first cycle actually kind of led them to where they're at now. And others, like you and I, it was not our goal. It wasn't our passion at
you're right.
initially. It
Mhm.
just kind of came into our life at a particular moment, and we
Mhm.
just grabbed hold of it and rode the wave.
Yeah, and what is it about parents, myself having my kids are 42 and 40 now, but what is it about us as parents that choose or not to choose to have conversations? Dad chose to have a conversation at that time. Another time when I was a little older, puberty now, um, we were on vacation in Estes Park, Colorado. And for whatever reason, as my 13 or 14-year-old self, I decided to have a private moment in one of the rooms of the cabin. And he walked in, and all he said at the time said, "Whoops, I'll be back." And but he never had any kind of follow. I probably proceeded, or maybe I was too shocked to have my dad walk into me at that moment. But certainly, as I talked, having had that moment, him never bringing it up again, but just not being shocked at me that much, or saying, "Hey, you're doing the wrong thing," or "Why are you doing that?" or "You're not in our house." None of that ever occurred either. So I think part of that was he knew I was probably doing what other 13, 14, 15-year-olds do at the time.
Yeah.
Whether he wanted to bring it up, he thought, well, I don't know what he thought. I wish I could have that conversation with him now. But be that as it may, what chose him to have a conversation with me when I was 10 about miscarriages, and not have a conversation with me when I was masturbating. I mean, who, I'll throw the word out there. That's the
Yeah.
word I want to use. Why?
Yes.
To the
Please
private
do.
moment. Yes, yes. Same thing I would do if I was working with a group of teachers. Yeah, we can call it masturbating. It's all right. So, um, I treasure those experiences. Not only it's my part of my coming of age, part of my growing up, but part of what I was able how I was able to see my dad and have that and build on our relationship. And then part of how I was able to transfer those experiences to talk to teachers, to talk to kids, and be involved in their coming of age and things too. So
Yeah.
that's it.
I bring this conversation up with my teenage son.
Hmm.
He's told me a few times, "Mom, I tune you out when you talk about it." It's like, that's okay. Because I know part of him is hearing it. And it'll stick in his head. He knows he has a resource. But I also know with my son, even though he tunes me out, he does have a resource. He knows where to
Mhm.
find he knows
Mhm.
he can ask me questions. I've been very open with him from a young age. He can ask me anything he wants. I may not agree with his decisions, but I'm there for him and I will support him as best I can. Um, I I told him, I said, "Hey, be careful with who you start intimate relationships with, um,
Mhm.
because the wrong thing could turn into something that will completely destroy your life, and I don't wanna put fear in him and scare him with relationships, but on the flip side, it's he has to be careful with those relationships,
Yeah.
um, especially in this current climate."
Yeah.
So it's and my younger son, as soon as he's getting I use proper body terms because you know what? These are our hands. We have no problems with saying, "This is our hand. This is our nose. These are our eyes. I have a heart. I have a thyroid. I have a throat. I have kidneys. I have a liver." But for some reason, a uterus, ovaries, vagina, vulva, anus, penis,
Mhm.
testes are all terms that we're like, "Oh my gosh," she said, "it's like almost a bad word." It's like, "No, it's your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a body part." It let's kind of understand it's our bodies.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a miraculous thing what our bodies can do. And just I give the example sometimes of why using the wrong terms can be detrimental. The
Mhm.
story I heard is of a kindergartner going into school. She was taught to call her vulva a cookie.
Mhm.
And she went to school and she told the teacher that her uncle was eating her cookie.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the teacher's like, "Oh, well, that's really nice that you shared your cookie with your uncle,"
Mhm.
not understanding until later what was
Yeah.
going on. And is this happening in other places? I don't know. However, do we want that kind of conversation to happen or that situation? We none of us want that situation to happen with our
No.
children,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
where if we
Mm-mm.
teach the correct body parts, then they can go and they can tell us if they something in was happening that they didn't feel comfortable with, and we knew what was really going on instead of being
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay, is it a food product or is it really
Mhm.
this happening?"
Yeah. No, we'd shared a similar we share in our trainings, we would share a similar story for my colleague would tell the story about how similar situation, a young elementary student, she was taught, uh, to call, her vagina and a purse. And so she would say, "Hey, my" whoever the perpetrator was, "My uncle was touching my purse," or "My uncle was with" and then through unpacking the story, it took an astute teacher to figure out, "Hey, this we need to intervene here."
Mhm,
But again, with this particular child's parents' discomfort in not naming the body part that it is and using a term that could be misinterpreted, purse, it made the child that much more vulnerable to the abuse that she was receiving. So, so that whole part is and then and on the flip side, when we would get pushback for our curriculum and people and parents, some teachers would say, "Why do you wanna teach a kindergartner or a first grader the word penis?" And we could unpack all the reasons why to use penis and vagina and vulva and all the body parts, yeah, uterus, all that. And it's so hard to get for some people to unpack that and realize the importance and, you know, okay, you try to let's call the eye something else, whatever that would be, a vision instrument or something silly, but we don't make up imaginary words or play words for those kind of things. Why would we do that for the other body and how important it is? And what's happening now with the more and more pushback about against family life curriculums and against the work that we did. especially here in Florida, which is such can be a volatile area right now. But still, the same pushback from people who say, I don't want you talking about to my kid about this, and I'll do it at home." Well, maybe I won't, but I don't want my kid to know that stuff. Why not? So it's just it's a dialogue that has to keep going and going and going.
Yeah, because if the parents refrain from teaching their child's going to learn
Mhm.
one way or another somewhere.
Mhm. Mhm.
Do the parents want their child to be taught correctly or incorrectly?
Mhm.
Do they want the myths that in my world I see a lot of myths. I um with how our bodies work. And it's because their friends are talking the children are talking to their friends and their friends were taught this on TikTok or
Mhm.
Google or wherever, and they're not getting the correct information.
Right.
And so you have this group of friends that are all talking and your child's being given incorrect information growing up to think that this is accurate information and then finding out 20 years later, well, what do you mean that's incorrect information?
Mhm.
What I
Mhm.
learned that what do you mean that's wrong? You mean I didn't have to suffer for the last 20 years over this because I was
Right.
given incorrect information?
Shoot.
And I look at it and go, yes,
You're
you
right.
suffered for the last 20 years because you were given incorrect information or not given information at all,
Mhm.
given the
Mhm.
bare bones basics, which I think is one of the big things that you got into with that with sex ed and trying to make sure that they don't have those issues. Um, Even one of the reasons why I got into it, you with your sex education, you have the advocates for youth and the newsletter.
Mhm.
Can
Mhm.
you share a little bit about that advocates for youth and
Sure.
what
Sure.
that is? And
Sure. Advocates for Youth, people can just Google that in, Advocates for Youth, and there's a number of people that Advocates for Youth has quite a few programs. One of the programs they have is Family Life Sexual Health Education. Wonderful seminars, rather wonderful trainings for teachers, lessons, curriculum about it. I work and still work and confer with a woman named Nora Galperin, and she um, eh, helps and guides teachers and people like myself who were training teachers. So, but one of the things that they emphasize was oftentimes, and this was true in Broward schools as well. And one of the things we were trying to um, undo in the time I worked there till I retired in 2020, one of the things part of the thinking we were trying to undo was people had a tendency, they knew this was a required part of the curriculum, but they would wait until May to teach it because, oh, they have to get through that, and they have to do their testing, and they have to do this, and then lo and behold, you'd get to the middle of May, "Hey, we haven't gotten to it yet. There's all this, oh, well, I've only got 3 weeks to do it." And then they would sort of cram it in if they did it at all. Sometimes the end of the year calendar would get away from them, and the kids would go and not have anything. So our and Nora, Advocates for Youth, laid it out so that it was an ongoing curriculum. There was something that's gonna happen, and you're gonna teach something in August. You're gonna have literature to read, and the kids that will help for the kids that will help them stimulate their interest, and you're gonna do something in October and November and and you make it throughout the year because certainly puberty just doesn't hit, or body changes just don't hit in May. We know. We know. And then when you would talk to teachers about this, it's, "Yeah, yeah, I had my first masturbation experience in October." Most people remember. Or I had my first period then, and they could tell you the date and sometimes the time and where they were sitting and what part of the school year. So that doesn't happen just in May, and it doesn't happen just in 5th grade, because that was the time that you had V-Talk was late 4th, maybe 5th. You don't wanna wait till 6th because they might have. So all these little it's something that Advocates for Youth set up curriculum that was proactive, not reactive, and that's still available. It's still, you can access that. And I would ask your listeners just to go Advocates for Youth. And if they need me to put them in touch with Nora or the group, I'd be happy to do that. The other person I follow quite a bit, and I think I sent you the reference, is a gentleman named Christopher Pepper. He works he works for San Francisco Public Schools, and in our work on different grants that our districts would share through the CDC, we Christopher and I and groups of others would meet 2 or 3 times a year uh, to talk about what was going on in our schools. And I had the pleasure of being in San Francisco with them. But he now and has for he has a newsletter out. I think I gave you the link. If not, I can get it to you. But I enjoy reading what he has to say. He too is a parent. He's a teacher. Talks about his experiences as a parent and how other teachers and parents can connect with what that's happening to him and his tremendous and very rich background in what he knows from sexual health education and his training. So those are two tremendous resources, not only for teachers but for parents as well, and helping teachers and parents and school districts be more proactive in this, because it's still the tendency of school districts and school boards to pretend that these lessons aren't needed or aren't necessary, or that, hey, mom and dad will take care of this. Well, even from my own experience, I know as rich as that experience was with my dad uh, when I was 10, and then the other things I had, and we never sat down and had the talk. I still picked it up from my friends, and even though the richness of that discussion at age 10 with my dad, I was never comfortable bringing other things up to him about what I was experiencing in my dating life or anything like that. It was, still hiding things and not talking. So what is it that a parent or a teacher can do to help a child, adolescent, a teen, a late teen, a 20-something, a 30-something be more comfortable in having those discussions? So that's a little bit about the resources with Advocates for Youth and Christopher Pepper's newsletter, which is the title escapes me right now. So
It'll all be in the show notes. So yes, if you're interested in the newsletter as well as Advocacy for Youth, all or Advocates for Youth, it will all be in the show notes. Yes, I get the shocked look from parents when I say that puberty starts 2 years for girls um,
mhm, mhm,
prior to their first cycle, their
yeah,
first bleed. It's 2 years,
mhm,
and they look at me. They're like, "What?" And I've seen youth as early as 7 get their first cycle, and as late as 16, 17.
mhm, mhm,
So when I had those conversations in 4th and 5th grade, for me, I already knew what was going on because I had already started cycling. Um, so I'm answering questions and all my other classmates are like, "What? How do you know this?" And it's my paternal grandmother sat me down and explained what was happening in my body. My mother didn't. I recently found out that she didn't know what was going on. She thought she was dying. Um,
mm,
and I didn't really have those conversations with my dad because I felt embarrassed even asking my dad.
sure,
I'm like, if my mom
sure.
can't talk to me about this, she's got the body parts.
Mm,
How my dad was more comfortable, but I was uncomfortable talking about it with my dad. I could talk now. I know I can talk to my dad about anything. Maybe a little bit
yeah.
uncomfortable for him now with how much I'm talking to my dad. But, um, I can talk to my dad about a lot of this, and as much as my mother is open and has a medical background, her and I don't always see eye to eye on different things.
Mhm,
But this has been an absolutely wonderful experience spending time with you, Kevin. Before we go, do you
mm,
have any wise words of wisdom for us to take along?
mm. Well, let's see, I'm thinking who the audience many audiences. A word of wisdom, I guess, would be, as much as I had this, background from my own my own father, not so much from my mom, but my own father, this modeling, I didn't take it to my own 2 sons. Even though and that was when they were growing up, this is before my awareness of sexual health education had evolved, and I was dealing still at that time with wanting the kids that I was teaching or the kids that I was principling to be, um, to be aware of this and would work with the teachers to help the curriculum at the time. We're talking in the '90s and early 2000s, but taking the kids to the museums and the places where they would learn this. But even doing all this, I wasn't sitting my own kids' sons down, just even to talk about what's on your mind or what's talking. So many missed opportunities. And I guess oh, you asked for a word. You're getting a lot more than, but just opportunity would be a way to, and the idea that as parents, as grandparents, you talked about your grandparents, just always to be, is to listen, to be tuned in, to be observational, but to always figure out as best we can, what could I bring up? Yeah, you may get a pushback like you said you get from your children, but if they don't have the information, then where are they gonna go? Like you talked about your son, he has the information, whether he chooses to talk to you about it, you've put it out there. And I think that does become a role of, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever. We want our kids to be equipped, we want them to be informed, and they look to us. Now, whether they know what questions to ask or when to bring it up, we can't count on that. So it's another word is listen, watch, observe, intuit, and then either on my own if I had to do it over, either on my own or with their mom at the time, to open up those conversations with our 2 sons. I didn't do that. I mean, they have certainly figured it out, but, and there's a lot of stories there too, but that would be just listen, nugget of opportunity, observe, don't miss the opportunity, and don't be afraid to take the opportunity that, they're saying there's a fear there, just like there's a fear in teachers to bring it up, there's a fear in parents to bring it up. Well, what do we have to lose if we don't bring it up? What
Mhm.
is there to lose? And there's only things to gain if we put those conversation topics on the table. And that's how I would put a little, there's never closure, but put a little closure on what we've been talking about today.
I appreciate that, and I agree wholeheartedly. Thank you so much, Kevin, for taking us on this journey into that beautiful conversation with your father, a little bit about the history of your book, Two Floors About Grief, your journey into education and how that brought you into the sexual education realm. All of this has been absolutely phenomenal. So thank you so much for joining us.
Heather, I've been looking forward to talking to you and enjoy and really treasure through the not only through the relationships we have on other venues, but also through listening to your podcast. Just how much you're helping people with the openness of your discussions and the importance of being open and encouraging people to take the opportunities that you and I discussed just now.
Thank you again for sharing that with me. I sincerely appreciate it and the listeners. All of the links to find Kevin, his books, the newsletter, the Advocates for Youth can be found in the show notes. Thank you so much, listeners, for
Thank
spending
you.
your time with us today. If you found a nugget of wisdom or a moment of empowerment, my mission is accomplished. Do you know someone that could benefit from this information? Please share Embracing Flow with them. Until next time, love hard, laugh often, and as always, be vividous. See you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Embracing Flow. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, submit a rating and review, and share it with your friends. Visit my website to receive your free PDF on 4 ways to decrease PMS. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, love hard, laugh often, and as always, be vividous.